If your car is anything like mine, your kids have utterly destroyed your backseat. Goldfish, fruit snack wrappers, lollipop sticks, you name it, it's all over. Say goodbye to all of that with Carcan. Carcan is a trash basket that fits right on the back of your seat. Going on a long trip, it can be used as a cooler or a storage bin. This thing is a game changer. Go to carcan.com and check out their wide array of vehicle storage accessories. That's carcan.com. Use the promo code Jim Montgomery 20 off for 20% off your order. That's carcan.com. Promo code Jim Montgomery 20 off. Carcan makes a great holiday present. What's up, everyone? Welcome to Back to the Future, the podcast that takes a trip down Philly sports memory lane. I'm your host, Jim Montgomery. Welcome to episode number 58. We got a great show planned for you today, but first, a few housekeeping notes. Be sure to like and subscribe this podcast. That way you stay in the loop. It helps us out with the algorithm. We're trying to grow this thing. We've done a great job over the course of the past year plus. So let's keep the momentum going. If you are a new listener, welcome. I'd like to say that every now and then because I know we're constantly getting new listeners from a variety of places. So welcome. If you are new and this is your first time listening to Back to the Future, not sure if you know this, you may have come from This Day in Philly Sports History, but if not, I do have a daily podcast, This Day in Philly Sports History, where we take a look at just that, this day in Philly sports history. We like to do some fun things. We've been prepping the month of October for the Philadelphia Sports Hall of Fame induction ceremony coming up this week, actually. It might be, not sure when I'm going to get to post this, so it might be at the same time. But if you want more information on that, go to philadelphiasportshalloffame.org. You get all the ticket information as well as information on this year's induction class. I will be there, so if you're going to come, let me know and hit me up and we can hang out. Also, be sure to like and subscribe This Day in Philly Sports History as well. And the good thing, I've said this last week, and I've said it a couple times actually, for Back to the Future, the good thing is it's not necessarily always topical with the current events. Like, obviously, This Day in Philly Sports History is specific to that specific day, and then we talk about the state of Philly sports that day. A lot of headlines. We just got done doing a ton of Phillies coverage. We've been following the James Harden situation, so kind of more difficult, I guess, for This Day in Philly sports history to catch up. If you miss a day, it's better to probably just skip it. I probably shouldn't be saying that because I need everybody to listen, but for Back to the Future, be sure to go back in the archives and check out some of the things we've done. I like to actually listen to them and as well, just to kind of see how I've grown and where I've come as a podcaster. So be sure, again, to check all that out. Best way to do it is to like and subscribe. All right, episode 58. This is one I've kind of had on my mind for a while. For those of you who know or you don't know, at one point I guess you could technically say I still am, was writing a book on the what ifs of Philadelphia sports history. From there, it kind of morphed into an Eagles specific book. However, one of the first what ifs dealt with the Philadelphia A's when they moved to Kansas City out of Philadelphia. And in honor of the anniversary of that, it happened the week of or actually this week, it technically was October 28th in 1954. What happened was the Major League owners struck down the sale of the A's to a group of businessmen from Philly. I think one was a car salesman, a couple other people that wanted to buy the A's from the Mack family and keep them in Philadelphia. But it didn't really work out that way, and I kind of want to know why. I wanted to get more deeper into why the owners didn't really want the A's in Philly, especially because I see a lot of parallels between the A's now with the whole Oakland moving to Vegas thing and what was happening then. So I figured, as we do on this podcast, let's take a trip back to the beginning. And for the A's, they were the American League was founded in 1900. Basically, what they wanted to do was compete with the National League and declare themselves a second major league in 1901, which ultimately set them up for the World Series and things like that. Philly was given a franchise to compete with the Phillies of the National League. And ultimately, I guess the league that they were, the American League was prior, had some teams more spread out across like the Midwest and even further out west. They wanted to have more of an East Coast presence. So that's where the A's came in. They wanted to compete with the Phillies, who were relatively still new. Like the National League was new itself. So Connie Mack was named the manager. He had known some people that kind of were running the league. So he was like, okay, I'll do it. He got Ben Scheib, who was one of the Phillies' minority owners, to invest. Mack actually kept 25% interest in the team, and then 25% of the team was sold to sports writers Sam Jones and Frank Huff. So basically, Scheib and his group owned most of the A's. Mack had 25%, and then the sports writer had 25%, which is important as we see how this sort of history and story progresses. They got their name, the Athletics, because prior to the National League, or I shouldn't say prior to the National League, when the National League was founded, the Athletic Baseball Club of Philadelphia was one of the first teams in the National League, but folded after a few years. So they, in honor of that and to keep with the history and the legacy of Philadelphia baseball, that's where the name came from. And much like any upstart league, they needed to have players. I kind of liken this to, if you remember, if you're a wrestling fan, when AEW first came out and they started picking guys that were cut or whatever from the WWE, and then they started to sort of actively pursue some of them. That's what the American League was doing. So they were taking players from the National League. And in Philly, one of the most notable players that kind of jumped ship was Nap LaJoie. He was stolen, as the Phillies called it, but he was a Hall of Famer. Ultimately, an arbitrator ruled that he could not play baseball in Philadelphia for any team but the Phillies. So ultimately, the A's sold him to Cleveland, and whenever Cleveland came on to road trips to Philadelphia, apparently Nap LaJoie was not allowed to play and make the trip, which I just kind of find that interesting because you wouldn't necessarily see that today. And then the NBA now is worried about the whole load management thing. And then here you got a guy legally that wasn't allowed to play away games in Philadelphia. But the legacy, I guess, of the A's is a complicated one. And you kind of can divide it into sort of three distinct eras. And I guess the first era we'll start is the first championship run. And right from the beginning, the A's were a great team. They were dominant. Between 1904 and 1914, they had won American League. I'm a Phillies guy. I keep getting that mixed up. But they won 6 American League pennants and 3 World Series. They won 100 games in 1910 and 1911, 99 in 1914. They had some great Hall of Fame hitters. They had some Hall of Fame pitchers. It was just an outstanding team that Connie Mack had built. Because ultimately what had happened, the way the team was run, is Connie Mack was kind of in charge of all of the baseball things, kind of GM, player, or GM, manager, player development, things like that, where Scheib and the other group kind of took care of the business. I would even say the sports writers were sort of just silent owners, but Scheib and his group were responsible for the day-to-day financial operations of the team. So because of their success, they were able to move into a brand new ballpark, Scheib Park, in 1909. it was state of the art for the time and just was just a testament because those teams were so good. They were selling out. They were the hot ticket when it came to baseball in Philadelphia. Because of all the money they were making and how it was, Connie Mack bought out Jones and Huff and basically became 50-50 partner with Scheib. And he kind of got more power in the sense that everything now on the baseball side was his. Everything on the financial side was Scheib's. So basically, Connie Mack was sort of the first manager or coach to have full authority and full control over everything. Usually there was at least a president or something like that, but it was sort of cutting edge at the time that there was nobody else kind of overseeing and kind of watching what he was doing. At least a lot of times the owners were heavily involved with it, where Connie Mack was just like, you deal with the money, I'll deal with the baseball. So back to 1914, though. They lost the World Series to the Braves. So they had won the World Series in 1910, 1911, and 1913. They get back in 1914 and lost to the Braves, who they probably should not have lost to, which kind of started some rumblings and rumors around the league that possibly the A's threw the series. Now, remember, this is around the same time that there was not a ton of money for ball players, and we're only a few years before when the White Sox had the whole Black Sox scandal where they were taking money to throw the games from bookies. So there was rumors going around that this was the case. That it was never found that was what happened. Connie Mack sometimes would allude to it, sometimes he didn't, and then he kind of blamed it on that they gave up and didn't play hard for him because they thought he was cheap. Like he didn't want to give them raises. He kind of tried to pinch pennies where it was possible. Mac blamed it that there was all these internal factions and they were a divided club, and they were also distracted because there was this another upstart league, because this was sort of the time where neither league was really established, the American or the National League. So this Federal League came up, and they were doing the same thing the American League had done, where they were stealing players by offering them more money. Again, think AEW with WWE and some of their free agents and things like that. Connie Mack refused to match the salaries. And I think that is what pissed off the players. They're like, listen, we have a great team here, and all you need to do, if you just pay us and match what they're willing to offer us, obviously part of it was the money, but they could have had an even more larger legacy of winning than what they did. So Mac, and as you're going to find out as we go through this, Connie Mack was a stubborn old son of a bitch. And he was like, fine, you're not happy? He traded, sold, released, did whatever he had to do to any of his players because of it. He was basically like, F you, this is what we'll do. Well, you get rid of a team that was winning 100 games a year. You get rid of all the good players on that team. Obviously, you're going to start seeing a decline. And it was immediate. They went from 99 wins to 43, and then they went 36-17 in 1916. So within 2 years of winning 99 games, they won 36, and I believe the 117 losses is still a Major League Baseball record to this day. And if it's not the loss record, their winning percentage is. And I should have done better with the math on that, so I do apologize. But they were last place from every year from 1915 to 1922. So that's sort of the first era of the Philadelphia A's, where they went from the best team ever to the worst team ever within 2 years, all because Connie Mack was stubborn and allegedly cheap, and the players were like, please, we want to stay, but he refused to match, got pissed off, and released them all. Want to show support for your Philly teams? Check out PhillyGoat.com. They have all your needs covered, whether it's Sixers, Flyers, Eagles, Phillies, Union, Philly boxing, Philly culture, Philly pride. There's something for you. They have tees, hoodies, hats, any color, any size you want, including kids. Go to phillygoat.com and use the promo code Jim Montgomery for 10% off of your order. That's phillygoat.com. Be sure your shirt has the authentic goat on the sleeve and use the promo code Jim Montgomery for 10% off your order. That's phillygoat.com. All right, so that leads us now into the second era of the Philadelphia A's. And one thing you can say about Connie Mack, he might have been a stubborn old man, but when it came to talent and putting teams together, he was pretty good at it. So after that little brief run where they were in last place, or I shouldn't say brief, it was an 8-year or 7-year run from 1915 to 1922, he started to get some young guys in there and put together a great lineup. You had Al Simmons, Jimmy Fox, and Mickey Cochran, who were all Hall of Famers. You had a Hall of Fame pitcher in Lefty Grove. And they had the best of both worlds. They had good pitching, a great lineup. And the only issue they had was their major competition during that little bit of a time frame. We're talking like 1927, 1926, 1927, that era, where the Yankees were good. That was the Yankees Murderers Row lineup. So they finished in second place in 27-28, but they did win the pennant in 1929, 1930, and 1931. I think what happens is sometimes the A's got overshadowed by the Yankees Murderers Row team. One, because it's the Yankees and everybody loves the Yankees. The Yankees are like the freaking Cowboys of Major League Baseball, only with a little bit more success. It is Dallas week here in Philly for the NFL, so I got to get my shots in when I can. But in all seriousness, that was one hell of a Yankees team. And the A's were coming in second place to them, and they actually got them then the 3 years in a row prior to that, won the World Series in 29 and 30. They won 100 games each of those years. And again, everybody thinks and hears about the Yankees Murderers Row. But during that time, like, it was the A's and the Yankees battling back and forth. If the A's were not in first place, they were in second place. If the Yankees weren't in first place, they were in second place. Both of them won 3 straight pennants. Both of them won 2 of 3 World Series. But we remember the Yankees because of what ultimately happened, which is sort of the cycle with the Philadelphia A's. Unfortunately, after they won that last World Series in 1930 and then went back and won the pennant in 31, it was the throes and the meat of the Great Depression. So obviously, attendance started to slip. And one thing that the A's always had for them was that they sold out in Philly. Or maybe not sold out, but they drew a crowd in Philly. And when the attendance starts to dip a little bit, you don't have money for the day-to-day operations. You don't have money, especially when you have Hall of Famers on your team. And we see this a lot of times with the good Super Bowl teams. Look at what happened to the Eagles last year when they went to the Super Bowl, and all of a sudden all these guys left for free agent contracts elsewhere. So Connie Mack, once again, started to sell and trade his players to offset some costs. Now, remember I said he was a miserable old son of a bitch sometimes. He got pissed because where Shibe Park was, the apartment building, I guess, in the outfield wall, and I've seen pictures of this. I would have really loved to have been able to see Shibe Park / Connie Mack Stadium live. But I guess you could sit either on the roof or from the windows, you could see the games and watch that way. And obviously a lot of people were out of work. They played a lot of these games during the day, so people would just sit outside their window, stand on their roof, and watch the games. Well, Connie Mack, being who he was, built up a spite fence to block the view from the nearby buildings, which is a total dick move. It really is. And because of that, what it did was people were like, well, screw you. I don't want to come to the games anyway, when they did have money and started to come. So it was sort of like the perfect storm of everything that was going on. So here you are in the Great Depression. You're a couple years removed from being one of the most dominant teams ever. And you're fighting with the fans in the building across the street by building up a fence so you can't see it. And honestly, for whatever you want to say about him, he could see talent, but the man was a dick. Like, he was an absolute and total dick. The Clashing Conferences podcast is a football conference-specific podcast that brings together the everyday passion of real fans and their not-so-friendly friends for the purpose of real-life football entertainment. Aggressive but friendly competitiveness is the name of the game, as this group of NFC East fans jabs and banters each other, trying to prove their pointless points. With an internal competition within for weekly and end-of-the-season bragging rights, watch as this group will still boast and brag even when their teams fail to bring home the W. New episodes drop on Thursday, available on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. All right, and then finally, we have the first championship run, the second championship run. You can almost say dynasty. The first dynasty, second dynasty, and then you have sort of the end. So Connie Mack was getting older. He was in his 60s, I believe, in the 30s and going into the 40s. And many people felt that the game had passed him by. He wasn't in touch with the young players anymore. He was kind of like the old school mentality. Even the way he dressed, you probably have seen pictures of him with the suit and the hat on. That's basically how he dressed. And then when Major League Baseball changed the rules, the managers wore uniforms. He still refused and wore that, which actually caused, like, sometimes he wasn't able to manage it. Like, it was a mess because, again, he was a stubborn old son of a bitch that was so set in his ways, didn't even want to update his dress or anything like that. But he knew his baseball, and he really cared and loved and wanted to do well for the city of Philadelphia and the A's. And he really wanted to get back and build that winner again. But he had no money for a farm system. So a lot of owners, and even today, like, you look at the big-time owners, they made their money in something else. Well, Connie Mack didn't come from the money from something else. He didn't have any non-baseball money. And so, like, when things got bad, he lost his money, and he didn't have the money because everything he had was invested in the team. If you remember, he started off with, I told you, we are going to come back to it. He started off with a 25% stake in the A's, and then kept buying up when things were good. Now that things are bad, he doesn't have, like, the oil money, or Jeffrey Lurie has the Hollywood money, or whatever money people have from that. And he also, and this is where sometimes they said the game passed him by, he refused to hire a general manager. Most teams at this point were starting to move toward that. Remember, he went from having everything in control, where a lot of teams, the owner or whoever else was involved. And so obviously it's not something that he wanted to kind of give up. So he refused to do it. He was basically, again, I told you he was stubborn. He was stubborn. I'll do it myself. And so one idea he had, I guess the Baker Bowl where the Phillies played was a falling apart stadium. So he invited the Phillies to move into Shibe Park. It just sounds like a bad sitcom, to be honest. Like, I can just picture this as people. But he invited the Phillies to move in to Shibe Park, basically pay rent to play there because they needed a place to play. Still wasn't enough to get the revenue they needed. So obviously that meant couldn't pay the big money for the bigger players. So the team just started piling up losing season after losing season after losing season. And on top of that, Connie Mack was getting older and more stubborn. In fact, like, there near the end, there were people had said that he would fall asleep in he always held up the program, and, like, I've seen old movies of this, but he would fall asleep in the dugouts during the games, and the coaches were basically the ones making the decisions. And there were definitely calls for him to be fired within the organization, the sports writers, the fans. But it's hard to fire the guy who basically is the guy. Like, he wasn't going to fire himself. So from the time that they won that last World Series or won the last pennant in 1931 until early 1950s, they only had 2 winning seasons. Finally, in 1950, his sons decided, who kind of, it was the way they set it up. It wasn't necessarily a trust, but like he started signing over some things to them. They decided to kind of ease him out after the 1950 season. So it was sort of like he wasn't fired, but he wasn't necessarily going to be the manager anymore. But I mean, say what you want. I mean, at the end of the day, he managed 50 years for the same team. Now let that sink in for a minute. And like we see like guys like Andy Reid, who was in Philly for 13 years and now he's been in KC ever since. You see guys like Mike Tomlin. Like the whole Steelers organization is like a different thing. You see these guys that stay at the same place for a long time, and it's very few and far between. And even when they do, like Andy Reid, 13 seasons was like an anomaly. Now, 50 years he played or managed for the A's. Obviously, that's a lot of games, and it should not come as a surprise. He's the all-time winningest manager, has the most wins of anybody in Major League Baseball history. That happens when you manage for 50 years. He also has the most losses. Again, that happens when you manage for 50 years. But I think the contrast and the thing with Connie Mack is just when he was good, his teams were good. He had those 5 100-win seasons. He ended up, like I said, getting all of the accolades and everything like that. But he also had 11 seasons where he lost 100 games. So, I mean, it is what it is, but he won 5 World Series, I think 9 pennants. So, I mean, he could win when it happened. But again, when he got old and stubborn and started selling all his players, his teams were bad. But when his teams were good, they were good. And so 500 win seasons, 1,100 loss seasons, and that's not including the 90 win seasons and the 90 loss seasons. But just kind of give you the compare and contrast with Connie Mack. So how does it all end for the A's? Mr. A himself now is not the manager. Basically started stepping back from the baseball side, but he still had his 50% ownership stake. Ben Scheib had long passed, but so basically you had Connie Mack's sons and Ben Scheib's sons. And actually I think there was a stepson for Connie Mack that was kind of sided with the Scheibs. But Roy and Earl Mack bought out everybody else. So ultimately, like they were basically the owners of the A's then, and like the Scheibs and I think it was Connie Mack's other son, like they just wanted to get away from it because they knew they were losing money. So even though they bought them out, they still couldn't make money or win because, unfortunately, they were always the darlings of Philadelphia. They were the fan favorites. And because they had so many losing seasons, they still drew a little bit. But all of a sudden, what happened is that the Phillies started to get good. All of a sudden got good. And in 1950, we know the Whiz Kids went to the World Series, and they had a lot of young players. They spent money on good players, and they were likable players. I mean, there's still people that love Richie Ashburn. Like, I know some older guys that love Richie Ashburn as a player, not just the announcer. So you had those. They were getting better. They were competitive. They were a fun team. And the A's just continued to stink it up. So by the 1954 season, they were completely broke. And if they weren't broke, they were well on their way to being broke. So the Mack brothers had no choice but to put the team up for sale. There were a lot of Philadelphia offers that came in. groups of people from Philadelphia, businessmen who wanted to keep the A's in Philly. And I mean, to be honest, if I had money like that and I had the opportunity to buy the Phillies or the Sixers or Flyers or any of the local sports teams, that'd be like a dream come true. The issue becomes the American League president at the time, Will Harridge, didn't think the A's could be viable in Philly. And I don't know if it was him or others who didn't think so. But the issue was the other owners, when they came to Philly, I guess because somehow they shared the revenue at the gate. I don't know what, I didn't understand this when I was looking. But when teams would come in, they weren't making enough money to make it sustainable to pay for their trip into Philadelphia. So they called it the Philadelphia problem. And they felt, the other owners and the president of the American League, the only option is to move the team out of Philly. So there was a ton of pressure because he had all these offers coming in to buy the A's. Well, there's a lot of pressure to approve a sale to a guy named Arnold Johnson, who was a Chicago businessman. Here's where it gets a little shady. He had ties with the Yankees. He owned Yankee Stadium, and he owned Blues Stadium in Kansas City, which was a Yankees farm team. His goal was to buy the team, move them to Kansas City, fix up Blues Stadium. You took care of the Philadelphia problem, and now you got a team in Kansas City. He's making money off of Yankee Stadium. He's making money off of Blues Stadium. I'm sure at some point he probably would have built a new stadium for the Yankees farm team. So guess which team had a lot of support for Arnold Johnson and who really worked the crowd to get more support? Yeah, if you said the New York Yankees, you would be correct. And obviously because the Yankees being the Yankees, that carried a lot of weight. So kind of backdoor and side alley handshakes and things like that. This sale was completed and was set to be, Mac gave his blessing, Connie Mac, old man, gave his blessings to have this done by October 18th. All of a sudden, Roy Mack comes out of nowhere and says, I've sold the A's to a Philadelphia-based group. Got one guy was a car dealer. I forget the rest of the makeup of his group. And ultimately, everything looked like it was going to go through. So there was a deal in place, tentatively, I guess, to sell it to this guy, Arnold Johnson. Roy Mack said, no, we're going to keep it in Philly. And that's kind of what Connie Mack wanted. That's kind of what he felt and where he thought they should be. But then, even though it looked like everything was going to go through, everybody's favorite baseball team, the New York Yankees, allegedly, now it wasn't proven, but allegedly, you can connect some of the dots here, planted rumors that this Philly-based group really didn't have the capital to buy it. And the league knew that this was a money pit, so they needed somebody that had the money to take care of all the debt and everything like that. So leave it to the Yankees to pull some shadiness like that. All of that being said, the approval of the sale came up one vote short. I don't know what happened. Nobody knows what happened. One of the votes against the sale that Roy Mack brokered with this group from Philadelphia to buy the the Philadelphia A's, one of the votes against it was made by Roy Mack. Figure that one out. You want to talk about old man Connie Mack being pissed off? He was furious. Unfortunately, he didn't have the money to run the team and take it over, but he got backstabbed by his son, which, again, the whole story is shady, and there's a lot that probably we'll never know for sure. But Roy Mack voted against the sale of the A's to a Philadelphia-based group that he helped broker. Now, you don't want to tell me something shady's going on behind the scenes with the Yankees, and you thought the Yankees were that team now? They were always like that. Scumbags. But yes, Connie Mack was pissed. So now they ended up selling the team to Arnold Johnson. because that deal obviously did not get approved for the Philadelphia group in time. So Johnson took it. Now all he needed to do was get approval to move the team to Kansas City, which ultimately was his plan all along. But that was a little bit harder to do, but he got it done. The Phillies bought Scheib, now known as Connie Mack Stadium, so that helped give them some money that way. And then the A's played in Kansas City in 1955 before eventually moving to Oakland. Probably, I didn't get into the details and I don't know the backstory of it. I'm sure it's probably something very similar because there's just some franchises that, for whatever reason, are just poorly run with poor ownership and or snake bitten, whatever you want to say. I mean, and ultimately that's what happened in Philadelphia. Connie Mack just did not adapt with the times. That's what's happening with the A's now. Their owner is like, he made a couple calculated moves and they all failed, so that's why they're going to Vegas. It's just some franchises are just prone, like the Cleveland Browns. They're just prone to choke and do something silly. The A's are just going to end up, I'm sure, eventually after the newness wears off, they're going to be broken Las Vegas, just like they were broken Philly, broken Kansas City, and broken Oakland. Some teams just are not well run. But, I mean, I guess to wrap things up here, and again, that story is just, it blows my mind. Like, there's just so many things that, like, I would love to see a movie about this. But, so if you're a movie person and you want to work on a movie about the rise and fall of the Philadelphia A's, hit me up. I think that would be a great movie. I'd watch it. Let me know. Let's do this. But the A's actually had a more successful run in Philly, especially if you go championship-wise, than the Phillies have, who the Phillies still have only won 2 championships. The A's at least won 5. They might have had way shittier seasons in between, but they won 5 compared to the Phillies 2, and they were only here for, 53 years, 54 years? The A's have no numbers. The Philadelphia A's have no numbers of their players retired in Oakland, which I think is an absolute travesty. I don't know if that's done purposely, but you mean to tell me like Mickey Cochran, Lefty Grove, Al Simmons, those guys, all Hall of Fame players, shouldn't have their numbers retired? I don't know, but who knows? Maybe they could sell it to their family and maybe make some money and maybe not have to move to Las Vegas. There is a what if here, and that's where I originally started this podcast with. My what if for the book was, what if the Phillies moved and the A's ended up staying? Do the Phillies end up in KC? Do the Phillies and the A's play in the 1980 World Series, but for opposite cities? It's just kind of one of those ultimate things that there's just so many different ways that you can go down. But the Philadelphia A's, it's a mixed bag of history and a mixed legacy. I mean, you have 5 World Series and 9 pennants. You have the 1,100 lost seasons. I mean, I don't think there's any more up and down you could get with that. But let me know what you're thinking about the Philadelphia A's. Would it make a good movie? I was joking about that, but in my head, I'm like, I would watch this movie. Like, have Kevin Costner star as Connie Mack. There's your movie. And I'm sure Kevin Costner probably knows the whole story and could. Let's make this happen. I know there's some movie people out there. Let's make this happen. Let's get on the phone and get Kevin Costner to play Connie Mack and do the Philadelphia A's story. Come on now. All right. Like I said, be sure to like and subscribe this as well as This Day in Philly Sports History. Next week, I'm not sure when, but we will be recapping the Hall of Fame ceremony. I have no idea what to expect. I'm going in there. I don't know if I'm going in as a fan. I don't know if I'm going in as a guest. I don't know if I'm going in as part of the media. I have no idea. I'm just going to go and soak it all in. And next week, I'll come back and next week's episode will be all about just recapping what happened at the Philadelphia Hall of Fame. I am very, very excited to see some of the people and talk with their families and things like that. On This Day in Philly Sports History for November, in honor of the Phillies disappointing us, we're going to look at the most disappointing players in Philadelphia sports history. These are guys that were either free agents or draft picks that came in with high expectations and just never lived up to them. It's just what we do in Philly. So be sure to listen every day for your daily sports lesson, as well as checking out the kids and everybody's going crazy right now. But trying to get this done before Halloween, and they are out of control right now. But look at the disappointing players in November. Be sure to check out the archives of Back to the Future. Looking forward to growing this thing, and I need your help. Spread the word. Tell a friend. Tell anyone, your neighbors, whoever. Let's grow this thing. I got some big things on the horizon, so stay tuned for that. Hit me up on social media, YouTube, TikTok, Twitter, Jimbo_Mont, Instagram, Philly Jimbo. Be sure to give me your thoughts on the Philadelphia A's and whether or not we got a blockbuster movie here. Hopefully a blockbuster, not like Blockbuster Video and be out of business. But let me know. Go have yourselves a week. I'll be reporting back next week, fresh off the Hall of Fame ceremony. I'm Jim Montgomery. This is Back to the Future. And until next time, I'll see you when I see you.